Welcome back to another episode of KSP 101. This is episode 24. Glad to have finally found some time and availability to resume our missions. As you can see, I'm back where we left off, in orbit around Gilly here. And we are planning to land on Gilly and then send these two off into solar orbit to Rendezvous, dock, transfer between the two vessels, and come back home so we can wrap up everything there with our current contracts, as you can see here, except for the one there that we're going to have to eliminate, which won't be a big deal or of any real consequence. We just forgot to add the research lab onto that, but that's okay. But we are going to land on Gilly, grab some science, break out the breaking ground modules, plant a flag, and then leave. And we'll go to the Explore the Sun contract, which is docking the two vessels around the sun, rendezvousing them first, and then we'll make it back home. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get this mission underway. I'm currently locked onto retrograde, so I'm going to disengage my SAS and re-engage it so I'm not locked onto anything, so these don't rotate and smash into each other whenever I undock. I'm going to go ahead and do the undocking and then switch to this vessel that we're going to be using for the landing. I'm going to reactivate the SAS. As soon as that's on, I'm going to switch to my docking mode, activate my RCS, and boost away from the station just a hair there. Once we are a safe enough distance away, I will then activate the retrograde. But for now, I'm going to let it slowly move away. Should be clear enough, I would say. I'm going to go ahead and lock that retrograde now. I'm going to try to also shift it around a little bit. That way we don't burn our vessel whenever I activate those thrusters. So there we go. Now I'm moving away from it just by going to the docking mode, linear control mode, and just moving the control stick in any direction really. And now we are free of the vessel. I'm just going to go back to staging mode. I'm going to activate this engine, making sure that my throttle is down. And Delta V is not too much of a worry here at Gilly. It's not going to take too much to do anything. But we are going to go ahead and set ourselves up for this landing. Let's also keep an eye as we throttle up and move away from the station and begin our landing. As you can see, it didn't take too much to bring that periaps down. We're going to keep it about there at 5,000. That should be okay. Let's go ahead and time warp on over now. Say goodbye to that station. See, our orbital velocity is not even 10 or higher, but it is getting there now that we're approaching our landing. Let's just keep an eye on this vessel and make sure that we didn't drop that periaps down too low. Should be fine though. Doesn't look like that line's in any danger. But we did set it to warp us just a little behind that periaps, so we don't have too much to worry about just yet. Now that we're on the sunny side, we can actually see the surface of Gilly. We can try to pick a nice spot to land this thing. Anywhere's fine, really, as long as you have enough reaction control power on the wheels. Like enough control of the vessel with the reaction control wheels or with the RCS, and as long as you have plenty of RCS. And we have plenty of monopropellant fuel for that, so looking fine. Now, landing is going to be very slow and tedious here. What I'm going to go ahead and do is, well, we can't really time warp now any further since we're below 8,000 meters. What I'm going to do is point radial in, kind of point straight down at the surface. And if you do this, you have to be kind of careful about it, and you are using fuel if you do this as well. But I'm going to use a little bit of monopropellant fuel at first, just to see how much we can affect ourselves by this. It's barely picking up speed, but we are very slowly approaching that periaps. I'm just going to go on ahead and use the thrusters slightly to bring that down. While pointing at radial in. try to point it to where it's right below us right now because there's a nice landing spot beneath us. I think about there should be fine. We'll just keep an eye on that. Actually, I'll go ahead and do a little bit more until that's directly beneath us, because that is where we want to land anyways. Now I'm going to deactivate the RCS and point retrograde and engage our landing gear. Once we are nice and lined up, everything is engaged, I'm going to make a quick save just in case anything might happen. Now we can either just coast on down at 28 meters per second. It's barely even going to increase down, or up to like probably 35 meters per second, if even that, by the time we get down to the surface, but we'll see. Could do that, or could do something else, which is pointing prograde, which is now pointing at the ground, and increase our speed, which would be a waste of fuel, but it's really up to you whether or not you want to use time or fuel here at Gilly. But right now, since I am trying to keep this within an hour and try to get everything done, I am going for the time option. So I'm going to point retrograde, I'm going to boost this up to about 50 meters per second, then point retrograde again. Once we get close to the surface, we just have to burn that speed off. Don't want to burn it down too much though, because whatever speed you have coming down, you're pretty much going to maintain all the way down to the surface. But we are now quickly approaching the surface, which is good. We'll just wait until we're a little closer. This is the ideal place to do what's called the suicide burn. Alright, now that we're fairly close, I'm going to do that. I'm going to drop it down to about there, about 15 meters per second or so, give or take. Once we're even closer, so we can see our shadow now a lot better, I'll go ahead and burn that down to about 5 meters per second or so. Now here is an error that I had made. I forgot to switch to surface mode, but that's okay. We'll just take manual control, go back to staging, find our retrograde mark, and we'll just burn until that's relatively close to 0. And then I'll show you something else that we can do to approach the surface. I just have to maintain manual control because we won't be able to lock on the retrograde at this point. There will come a point where we are going to be going straight down, so honestly it might be better just to go ahead and lock ourselves on to radial out, which is not showing on surface, but it is radial out. But I'm just going to lock SAS instead. And then once it gets close enough, I'm going to activate the RCS, go to docking mode, see if I can't push that retrograde marker to where it's right beneath us while kind of boosting down. And I'm going to start boosting back up with the RCS so we can control our landing speed and make it as close to below 0, if not 0, as possible. Because once we land, as you can tell, everything is very slow. What we might need to do is activate our RCS and boost down towards the ground. See, it's really not affecting it a whole lot. It's not making anything go any faster. We are going to leave the pilot in the vessel and go ahead and get started on our mission. I'm going to do a quick save before we do that, just in case anything happens while we are down here. And let's go ahead and begin by grabbing a crew report and the rest of our science that's on our command pod. Move on to the mystery goo, grab that. Then we'll grab the gravity reading, or barometric, whichever that is. I think it's the barometric. Let's go ahead and grab that. Let's close this docking port so it doesn't really get in the way of anything, so we can see what we're doing a little better. Let's see, there's the temperature, or the thermometer. Let's go ahead and grab that. We'll grab the seismic data, and we can get our gravity reading after that. Then after we have all that, I'll make sure to turn our brakes on by hitting square or I believe X on the Xbox. Alright, so that's all the science we can get off the command pod. Let's go ahead and get our engineer out here to begin placing these breaking ground modules. Let's see what we have. There's the science, so let's go over to the other side. There we are. Let's grab the Probodyne experiment control station, stick that in our inventory, and find a nice place to set that. Now remember, there's not much gravity here at all. We're not going to need the ladders or anything. We'll just activate our RCS and boost on over here. Be kind of conservative about how you are using your RCS. Doesn't really take a whole lot here. Let's go ahead and place the control station. Get back over there and grab our Communitron module. So you're barely even using any RCS on this backpack to boost up, because the gravity here is virtually non-existent. Can literally just kind of float here and grab what we need. Once we have that, let's head on back over and place that beside our control module. See, as you can tell, getting to Gilly is the only hard part about the Gilly mission. Getting to Gilly and coming back. But once you're at Gilly, landing and completing all of your science missions here, very simple, very easy. Doesn't take much to do anything here. Which consequently, that means we'll be spending less time here, because we'll be done with this fairly quickly. And I'm not sure if there are any surface features like rocks that we can grab while we're here. I know that there are some, but I believe those may just be for rovers that you send here, but we'll find out before we leave just to be sure. And after we deploy the photovoltaic panel here, we'll check and see how much power we're getting out of that. The Communitron only needs 1 unit of power, so does the experiment control station, and it is producing 4. So we may just stick one more out as a backup and to help produce more power in dimmer solar exposure circumstances. So let's just grab one more of those, go grab our vessel here and grab that, then we'll break our scientist out. The reason why we are leaving our pilot in the vessel is so that they can maintain control of this vessel, keeping it upright, that way it doesn't fall over, which it would do very slowly, but it still calls for concern, since there's not enough gravity to pretty much just stay where we are, like stay stable. And keep us down on the surface properly. See, all I did was nudge the stick forward a little bit, and gravity and all of its unabundance here just allowed us to kind of zoop off to wherever. So you have to be very careful. You can pretty much make orbit with your RCS backpack here. It's very interesting. Alright, so there's all the power that we're going to need. I'm just going to actually stop dead in my tracks here and leave. And then get Bob out here to do his job, starting with the GUEB monitor. We'll take that over there. We'll just keep crawling down until it automatically lets go, and then float our way on over here. Find a nice spot to put this. I believe I'm just going to set it down here next to the control station. Looks like a good spot. Let's get back over here and grab our new experiment module, the ionographer. It's for planets without an atmosphere or in a vacuum. Pretty much any moon except for Lathe. planets outside of course, Jewel, which you cannot land on. Of course, Duna, Eve, and the home planet of Kerbin. It's a very useful breaking ground module. Gives us something to do besides the GUEB monitor and the seismometer, which I actually believe that we brought with us. Which, 9 times out of 10, you're really not going to use that unless you bring something to smash into the surface with you. But just in case we did happen to bring it with us, I'm going to go take a look over here at this back-end cargo container, because I cannot remember if we decided to bring that or not. Looks like we did, so you'll get to see that in this episode. I'm going to grab it real quick and take it over there to deploy. Then we'll be done deploying all of our breaking ground science modules here on the surface of Gilly. Just gotta find a decent place to put this. I think I see one right over here on this side. So I'm gonna land myself right over here to the left and place the passive seismometer module down here. And again, in order for this to even get any science to transmit, you're gonna have to slam something into the surface near it. Which we may be able to do with the Kerbal. I've never tried that. I'm gonna go straight up. I'm gonna go back just a hair and slow that speed back down. I'm gonna slam into the ground just ever so slightly. See, it's not really getting us any science unless we slam something into the ground. So I guess it's time to finish on up here. Just go ahead and let our scientists do that by first orienting ourselves towards the 90-degree mark for our flag. We'll just go ahead and place it there. Now it's time to tally up. We've had one on Kerbin, one on Mimus, one on the Mun, one on Duna, one on Ike, one on Eve now. So this will make flag number 7 if I'm not mistaken. And while we're at it, let's go ahead and grab the EVA report. And if it'll stay stable long enough for us, let's grab our surface sample. And the hunt is on. Let's activate our RCS and hop up and see if we can't find a surface feature like a rock to take home with us. I believe I see some things over there, but I think those are the ones for the rovers. Looks like every one of these nearby are the large rocks for rovers. But seeing a couple over here, we'll just boost on over and take a look. I'm gonna increase the speed to about, oh wow, we're in orbit now. Let's try to slow ourselves down a little bit more so we can get back out of orbit. There we go. And then try to reorient our Kerbal. Well, looks like we're gonna have to do some unorthodox methods here to make sure this Kerbal doesn't go flying off into space. So we'll have to take it nice and slow. That way we don't put ourselves into orbit accidentally. I'm fairly certain that none of these can be gathered by a Kerbal, because most surface features like this on other worlds are for rovers, but we'll give it a shot. You never know, I suppose. Once we get close enough, let's go ahead and burn back, reducing our speed while maintaining our altitude. Once we're right over top of it, we'll just kill that speed. Do a nice controlled landing near this. It's a very interesting looking surface feature. Not too much unlike all the others we've seen so far, but still unique enough. And we'll keep this menu open and kind of hop around here a little bit. See if it doesn't give us any opportunity to grab anything off of this. I'm not seeing anything though. So we're not wasting tens upon tens of minutes here trying to figure out if we can. still have a little under half of our backpack. That's more than enough. Let's go ahead and increase our speed to about 15 or so, should be okay. Increase our altitude a hair. Push that pro-grade marker to where it's pointing ahead of us. We'll just drift our way back over to the ship, grab all the science off of the command pod, and we'll be done here. Very curious what that is, though. Oh, that's our other Kerbal. Looks like he's made his way down there for some reason. It's interesting. But irregardless, we are done here. We just need to get ourselves back in our vessel after grabbing that science, and then believe it may be better to go ahead and put our station in a solar orbit ahead of time. But then again, we may want to rendezvous back up to completely top this vessel off with fuel before we do that. That way it has all the fuel it's going to take to meet it back up in solar orbit. I think that sounds like a better plan. Let's float on over here to the backside so we can grab all this science. And again, I didn't put any ladders on it because we can literally just float here and grab it once we get close enough to be able to grab the data. There we are. Alright, now let's go ahead and take that, and we'll float our way on over to the other side and grab our gravimetric data. And now, let's go back over here and grab a hold of our vessel so we don't have to concern ourselves too much more with controlling our float. Let's take our temperature reading and our barometric reading. Let's grab the crew report out of our capsule and then get back in. Looks like we have to climb up a little bit and then do that. Alright, now we just need to get Bill back in. Then we'll be on our way. I don't know how we got all the way down here. And again, this is KSP, you just never know sometimes. Alright, now let's get you back in here so we can get on out of here and find out what's in store for us after this solar rendezvous and docking. We do have some things that we have to do once we dock back up with our station, though, now that I remember. Let's try to get it to where the station's pretty much directly over top of us, though. Odds are we're going to rotate around and be under it before it rotates and is over top of us. Hopefully we'll still be on the day side, though. We'll do that, and cut. That's almost close enough. Really won't matter, it doesn't take too much to do our job here. But we do need to go back to the map screen and then set this as our target. I'm actually just going to set ourselves directly at the target once we boost up just a hair. First, I'm going to check out what our RCS does. In docking mode, just go ahead and try to boost up a little bit. Yep, it's letting us take off with the RCS. Let's retract our landing gear, build up a little bit of speed. Once we have that, we'll go back to staging mode, disengage our RCS, and lock onto our target mark. Make sure we're not pointing at the ground or anything. We'll just go ahead and build up enough speed to push directly up to the station. Then we'll adjust our trajectory once it's close enough. So it won't really matter a whole lot that we're pointing in the opposite direction, or perhaps it will. Let's adjust that to anti-target. Okay, now let's burn that way. Try to reduce that back down a hair. Let's then see, it's going to take a minute before we're back up to 8,000 meters. So the reason why I burnt anti-target was to reduce the apoapsis down again, but trying to stay in line here, which didn't work out entirely too well, but looks like it may have worked out well enough because our orbital line is still very much in line with the orbital line of the station. We're just gonna wait until that hits a little higher up, that way we can gain some warp control. Until then, it's basically just sit back and enjoy. Could, in the meantime, grab our scientist, go EVA, see if there's any science we can do while we're on our way up. Let's try to grab an EVA report while we're in the space above Gilly here. Yep, there's a little bit. We'll just take that. And then see if there's any more we can do. Typically you can do gravity data. Let's find out. And the space near Gilly, we'll take that. If we don't already have it. We may even be able to get some more science, say from the barometer. But we'll find out. We'll take what we can get. The tricky thing is grabbing that, the gravity data. But looks like we already had some of that though. I think we'll be okay without grabbing anything else. What I would like to do is first lock retrograde, and after that point ourselves along that same line, pointing more towards the sky to readjust where our apoapsis is. I want it to kind of be at the other end instead of the direction we are going after all. So we'll just go ahead and adjust that. See if we can at least get our rendezvous markers up first. Looks like we'll have to bring that down a little bit after we do this. We need it pointing the other way though for certain. Maybe a good idea to go ahead and point radial in to try to force that to go towards the other direction. But we'll see. That's not helping out too much now, is it? Let's try to go beyond it. Over here to this side maybe. Nope, I need to go to the other side. That's right. Let's try a little closer to about here, see what that does for us. Still not quite what we're wanting. May have to try to point horizontally. There we go. Now we can just let that continue to go until we get that rendezvous a little closer. Looks fairly close. We'll point pro from here now. Try to bring that in. But before we do, we want to make this a fine tune, so let's go down to our engine and reduce the thrust limiter down fairly low. Say 0.24 looks pretty good. Alright, now let's see how close we can get that intersect line. Okay, so about 1.9 was about as close as that's going to get. We could try doing a radial out, but we need to switch to orbit mode. Looks like the bulk majority of it is because we need to be pointing anti-normal and bringing that down. So let's try that first. Keeping an eye on our intersect one node and the separation. Okay, so that is bringing us down and closer, which is good. We'll just let that burn down until it's as close as we can get. That descending node should wrap around and be right on top of those when we're as close as we can get it, which would be about there. Now we just need to find a way to get ourselves even closer. Let's try doing a little bit of radial out. Looks like that should do the trick. We should be able to zero that down, and our relative speed is not going to be very much. So yeah, that's really as close as we're going to be able to get that. We'll take it. Let's go ahead and save. Make sure that we're going to be okay in the meantime. Okay, so we're above 8,000 now. That's excellent. Now we can just time warp to our target. Let's make sure that we're in target mode, pointing retrograde. in advance, keeping an eye on how long it's going to take to get there as we manually time warp ourselves a little bit, making sure that doesn't deviate too much from point 1. And let's find a point to time warp to that's not too far from it. That should be fine. We'll just let it go ahead and do its thing now. I'm also going to go ahead and highlight the station so I can keep an eye on the distance. We're rapidly going to approach it now as we time warp ahead. We're still 11 minutes away. That's as far as we can zoom in. Let's go ahead and try to time warp ahead to burn off a little bit more that time. Only a couple thousand meters away. Can't really get a good beat on a time warp. Our intersect is 4 minutes and 22 seconds away, so that's probably going to be as close as we can get. Now we just need to locate the station on our map. Should be fairly close to this horizon line. There you are. Let's go ahead and slow ourselves down. Looks like that's not doing it enough. Let's increase the thrust limiter on that just a hair and prepare to cut that thing off real quick. 3, 2, 1, let's cut off. And we'll do the rest with our RCS. Docking around Gilly has been known to be a little buggy, but I think we'll be okay. Just zero out our relative velocity, point ourselves towards target after deactivating our RCS. Once we are locked onto the target node, we will then swap to the other vessel, do the same thing, making sure to control from our docking port, which we need to also remember to reopen on the other vessel after we locate the other vessel and lock onto it. Try to find that real quick. There it is. Just need to highlight its docking port, set that as the target, and point ourselves at the target. Not getting any control for some reason, are we? Let's find out why. Do we have to take manual control, or what is the deal here? For some reason it's not wanting to move, but it should be able to. Let's do a quick save and reload it. We might be getting bugged out because we have a connection. Let's load that up and find out what's going on. That or it just wasn't set to the target, which we did tell it to do, but we'll find out here in a moment. Once it reloads, it should have the target selected. If not, then we'll just do it again. We're already about halfway through the episode. As it's close to the end of my plan, I've already almost used up my data, but for this episode and maybe a follow-up. Alright, let's make sure to do this the right way again. Control from here, locate our vessel. Okay, so we have the target, and now it's moving relative to the target. Okay, so that's all it was. It was probably just bugged out. So while that's adjusting itself, and you can go to map view and then go back to move the kerbals back out of the view of your nav ball. Once this is done adjusting itself, pointing at us, we'll point back at the target again. Let them adjust each other until they're completely locked on and no longer moving. So there's still a little wobble and bobble action going on, but it looks like we are relatively close to where it needs to be. So let's deactivate the SES and reactivate it real quick. Go back over here, and just by switching back to this, it'll go to SAS mode instead of target, which is good. Now let's go back to this vessel, open up our docking port, and then we will dock up, finish up everything that we need to do here so we can move on. Alright, let's go to docking mode, make sure we are in linear control mode, activate the RCS and begin to boost towards our station here while adjusting our prograde mark along the way. Just going to pick up a little bit of speed here, which is relatively easy to do around Gilly. Or we can move in just a wee bit faster. See, at this rate of speed we'll be there in about a minute, but that's okay. Let's deactivate our RCS, go to rotational control mode so we can point ourselves back at the target a little better, and then go back to linear control mode, which you can swap between. Again, as I've mentioned in the past episodes, you can swap between the control mode of the docking board, or the docking mode. Down here on the left you'll see it lit up blue for linear control. Hit X or A on the Xbox and you'll be able to swap between rotational control mode and linear control mode. But for now, let's stay on linear control mode and reactivate the RCS. And prepare to slow ourselves down a little bit once we get closer to this. We are actually going to have to rotate ourselves. I'm going to go ahead and do that. In rotation mode, just make sure to disengage your RCS or you'll adjust your orbital parameters and relativity with your target vessel. Let's try to get that. Oh no, we're coming in hot. Oh, that did not go good now, did it? Didn't do any damage though. I believe that's okay. It's not what we wanted though. We can fix this real fast though. Just going to go back to linear control mode, activate the RCS, or deactivate the RCS. Let's lock on to retro. The second that it locks on the retro, we'll just try this again. We're just lucky it didn't damage anything. I was too busy focused on explaining things instead of focusing on the mission. Choose to thruster a little bit to be a little faster so we're not losing or gaining too much distance between us and our friend there. Let's just realign ourselves again. Won't be that big of a deal. It'll just take a minute longer. While that's locking on the target, I'm going to go ahead and force this one to do the same thing. Just came in a wee bit too hot there. But once we are locked on to each other again, we'll try this again. And we'll focus up this time. But again, you can just swap between linear control mode and the rotational control mode just by hitting X or A on the Xbox. Just make sure not to have your RCS on when you're in rotation mode and you start to adjust any of your orientation of the vessel, because that could spell disaster. So going to need to rotate again so our panels are in opposite directions and have little chance of interfering with one another. And I'll go back to linear control mode, reactivate the RCS. Let's try to get this going. Should take no more than 10 seconds to slow ourselves down with the RCS once we are at a close speed to the docking port. So once it's at about 10 meters in distance, I'm going to slam on the brakes and try to slow ourselves down to about 0.1 meter per second. So we're coming in fairly quick now at this distance. I may need to go ahead and do it a little sooner, so at about 15 meters I'll start slowing down. 6, 5, 4, need to make sure to keep our prograde over top of our target mark while we're doing this. It's been a minute since I've done this, since I had to take a little bit of a break there. Waiting for a little bit more time and availability to do more episodes. Go back to rotation mode and point ourselves back at the target mark and lock our RCS once we reach that. Go back to linear, slow ourselves down just a hair. Let's make this docking happen. It's a little fecal around Gilly where it can be affected so much where there's very little influence around Gilly because of the lack of gravity. But we made it. It's time to begin transferring some fuel from these tanks here. Let's grab the smaller one, the mid-size, and then the larger tank, and that should be everything from that stage, if I'm not mistaken. Alright, so then we'll go down to our tank for, say, our smaller tank down here and refill it on this vessel. And then once it's filled back up, we will deselect that tank and then grab our other tank and fill it back up. And then our vessel should be full of fuel again. Still plenty of fuel in the station for what we have in store for it. Now while we're here, just in case we didn't do it in the last episode, we need to highlight the command pod's hatch and then transfer one of our Kerbals into the station. Looks like we already did that. Okay, so let's transfer that crew member back onto our command pod. And then it is time to finish up the rest of our contracts. Let's see, we'll have that one done once we return. This is the one that we're focused on now. Dock 2 vessels on or around the sun after rendezvousing the 2 vessels in orbit of the sun. See, this vessel was topped up full of fuel. Let's go ahead and before we undock it, let's do a quick save. And then we will undock and pull it away from the station. Go to docking mode, hit the left trigger and pull away. Groovy. Let's deactivate the RCS, go back to staging mode and swap to our station. And it doesn't really matter how we leave the system, we just need to leave it. Just make sure we're not going to potentially smash into Eve or come into contact with Eve in the process. See, Eve is over there and we are almost in a point on our orbit to where if we do this now, we're going to be going straight to Eve. So we need to be on the other side of our orbit, or at least relatively close to the other side of our orbit, and make sure we're not going to make contact with the vessel that we just undocked. Alright, now once we are close to, say, about the other side of where we are right now, that's when we're going to begin our prograde burn. See, with Eve on the other side of the moon, or Gilly here on the other side of its moon. See, once we are pointed a little closer to where we're pointing at the sun on our orbit, say about there, this is where we will go ahead and do our prograde burn. We'll just let that reorient. Once it reorients to prograde, we will do a quick save and then send this thing off into a solar orbit and set it up for a rendezvous with the vessel that we just had docked to it, so we can use them to also complete this mission, and then send the vessel home and we'll be done with the Eve system, hopefully for now, but we'll find out. Now that we are pointing prograde, let's do that quick save. And then, let's go to our map view, begin to burn. Oh, we probably need to activate the engine, don't we? Let's do that. Make sure our throttle is down, activate that engine. I believe it's a mainsail. Okay, yeah, we still have plenty of stages to do all this, plenty of fuel. Let's zoom in on Gilly and begin our prograde burn and see where that's going to put us relative to Eve. Okay, so that was correct. It is pushing us out of Eve's sphere of influence. Just need to keep prograde burning until we leave Eve's sphere of influence. Once we see that, we'll actually start to wrap around like so. That'll be fine, I'd say. Well, we could make this a little more extended though. Say about halfway between Eve and Kerbin would be a good place to put that out to. It's a little farther out, away from Eve. Okay, that's good enough. We'll keep that mainsail stage on instead of ejecting it for now. Let's go ahead and update our quick save and then we'll head to the tracking station. We need to line ourselves up for this with our other vessel. We have about 15 minutes to do this. Might have to extend it just a little bit to bring this home, but we'll see. Grab a little coffee while that's loading up. That's what everybody needs at 6:30 in the evening. Okay, now, the object of what we're trying to do now is keeping an eye on that station that we just sent out into solar orbit, while also keeping an eye on the vessel that we're going to be transferring to it, which is currently around Gilly. And we should still be able to see the other vessel as well, somewhere around here, wherever it went to. Let's find out where it went. Let's go down here and set the focus on the KSS. Okay, so it's well on its way out. We are going to go ahead and let it do that. Once it gets into a solar orbit and out of Eve's sphere of influence, then we will focus up. Okay, so it's out of Gilly's sphere of influence now. So now the fun part, we should be able to pull this off right now, as is. We just need to wait until we wrap around and are pointing relative to it again. So we have our target, we have our line, so we can see where it is. And we can see ourselves in orbit around Gilly. Let's go ahead and time warp until we are lined up on our orbit with that vessel, the station that we're going to be transferring to. Should be about there. Let's go ahead and get back in our vessel there, set that as our target, and attempt to make our way into solar orbit with that station so we can dock up. Remember, from there in solar orbit we will then make our transfer back home to Kerbin. This may not be the ideal time to do this either though, but we'll find out. But first let's zoom out, make sure that that is our target, which is right in line with our prograde mark right now just about. So we will go ahead and do that. We are topped off on fuel. Let's go ahead and do a quick save just in case this is not the ideal parameters to be doing this. This may be the hard way of doing it. But let's go ahead and boost ourselves out until we leave Eve's sphere of influence. We probably do need to readjust the throttle limiter on the Wolfhound. Looks like we do. Let's go ahead and do that. Okay, now we can continue our burn. Just waiting until we see that leave Eve's sphere of influence. We're going to probably have to boost a little beyond our target apoapsis to be able to catch up to it. But we'll find out. It's still extending the periaps, or not the periaps, but the apoapsis out until it can break free of Eve. So we're just waiting to see that happen now. Looks like the apoapsis is the one increasing now. There we are. Alright, so that's fairly close up here. We need to try to bring that in even closer. Take at least 30 more seconds of burn time, I would say, but we're going to let it do its thing. Again, this is probably the hard way. Instead of letting the station wrap back around to where it's behind us to make our transfer that way, it's very likely this is not the ideal way to do this, but that's what we're going to do to try to save time. There's plenty of fuel in that station, so once we get to it, we're going to do our refueling and then head back home. Just depends. How much fuel do we have left? 500 meters per second. Okay. the stage and continue from there with the other stage with our Poodle engine. May be a way to bring this in closer with radio in or radio out, but let's find out. Looks like it might have to be radio out, but let's try radio in first. Okay, so let's try radio out now instead. Once we are locked on the radio out, let's go ahead and do that and see if it helps us get there any faster. Looks like it is. But we are probably going to run out of fuel here any moment now and have to stage. That is bringing it in a lot faster than it was though, that's good. Okay, let's go ahead and stage. Activate the Poodle, pull away from our debris there, let it do the rest of our burn. Let's also keep an eye on our fuel. So we are really getting close now. Once it drops down below 1,000, we're going to cut the engine off and then throttle its limiter, the thrust limiter, down to about maybe 2.87. That works. Let's re-highlight that separation. See just how close we can get this. Keeping an eye on that relative speed too though, because we are going to have to slow down to match its orbit. Looks like the closest we can get will be somewhere in the 740s, maybe 730s. Wow, down into 720s, it's about there. Now, let's point normal, and then go anti-normal, whichever will try to get us in just a little closer. 500, 4, it looks like that's pretty close, okay. So now let's go back to prograde and see if we can't zero that down just a little better. We have 2130 delta V, that's still plenty to make our docking. We just need to get there, then we can refuel. But for now, let's bring that down to as close to 0 as possible. Looks like that's going to be at 300 and some meters or kilometers. We'll take it. Let's just do a quick save 2 so we don't overwrite our other one, just in case this doesn't go as planned. And then we will manually time warp ahead once. It didn't really affect our separation, that's good. Let's let it leave E sphere of influence before we actually do the time warp over to it. Let's try to time warp as close to it as possible. It is 8 days and 51 minutes away. We'll just warp about 7 days and 5 hours and some minutes away. So by the time we get back to Kerbin, all of our science from the Breaking Ground science module should be done. Just let that do its thing and then check that once we get back. Alright, now we may be able to adjust ourselves to be a little closer to our target vessel from here. Let's try pointing radio out. Let's see what that does for us. Okay, that's bringing us further away. Let's try radio in. But we don't want to burn too much. We have to still have enough to be able to match its speed once we get to it. That might be as good as that's going to get. So let's just take what we have, point retrograde, set relative to the target with thrust limiter back at max, update our second quick save, and try to get ourselves as close to that separation mark as possible, and then bring ourselves in from there. Let's re-highlight that so we can manually warp ahead one space, make sure it doesn't affect it too much, and then we will warp close to that intersect node. Once they are close enough, say we're still about a minute away, let's go ahead and warp all the way on over there. Let's reduce our target speed down as close to 0 as possible. We'll keeping an eye on our delta V. We're still going to need some more after this is over. Not sure we'll be able to see our target just yet, where we are still quite a ways away. But After we get our target speed down to 0, we'll just point towards the target and burn until we get our encounter. 3, 2, 1, 0, cut off, and bring that down very slowly from here. We want it to be right at 0 for a reason. There we are. Let's point towards the target now, and then zoom back out so we can get this down as close as possible. We also need to make sure to reduce our thrust limiter as much as possible before we do this. Let's update our quick save to again. And then let's zoom all the way out so we can keep an eye on both intersect nodes. Try to bring this in as close as possible, as quickly as possible. The quicker it is, the more efficient it will be. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, say once it hits about 15 kilometers, it won't be too difficult to narrow ourselves down, but we'll just bring it on down as close to 0 as possible. It will raise our relative speed up a little bit, but that really won't matter. What we really want is to try to get this in as little passes as possible, so we're not using up as much time and being as efficient about this as possible. Let's go back to our thrust limiter and raise it up about to maybe, okay, 4. 4 will do. We just have to be careful about our throttle. Okay, now let's bring this into as close to 0 as quickly as we can. Looks like that's going to be as good as it gets. Let's cut it right there. Okay. So we are how far away? An hour and 4 minutes. Let's go ahead and time warp on over to that. Nice and close. Bring it on in. 2, 1. Okay, now we are fairly close to it. We should actually be able to see it maybe. We can find out our distance. Okay, we're 7,000 meters away. We should be able to see this thing now. Let's go ahead and point retrograde. We'll keep the throttle limiter, well, we'll raise it up just a little bit so we have a little more control and can slow down just a little better. Let's go ahead and time warp till we are at about just 1 kilometer away. Make sure not to time warp too quick so you can still control your time warp. Once it's about 1 kilometer away, we'll cut, if it can even get within 1 kilometer. If not, once it's about, see, if you're looking directly at the side of your vessel, we want to stop the time warp to where it's kind of right in line with us, like this. See, once it's right about there, we'll cut the time warp and then slow ourselves down back to 0 again. And once we hit 0, we just need to do it like we have in the past, since we are now close enough for it to be relatively similar to what we've done in the past. Looks like we overshot our retrograde a little bit. We can adjust that by going into docking mode and using our RCS to correct that. There we go. Now let's go back to staging mode and then target the vessel and boost ourselves on over. I'm going to pick up a relatively decent amount of speed here, probably, let's say about 50 meters per second or so. Maybe not, maybe 30. 30 should be okay. Let's go back to retrograde. And then I'm going to try to make it to where if we do have a chance of making contact with it, it won't smash into our panels or anything else near it. And just make our way on over here. That should have actually already taken care of the rendezvous, and it did. Now we just need to dock. And we are coming in pretty hot. Let's go ahead and start slowing down. Okay, we're not slowing down fast enough. Just let it happen. This is why we quick saved. wasn't being careful enough. The throttle limiter was too low for such a maneuver. We needed to slow down a lot faster than that, and I forgot to raise the throttle limiter back up. I really am rusty, aren't I? But it's okay. We're gonna finish this. We're gonna go over just a little bit here beyond the hour and finish this up once this loads back up. Okay. Now, where did we leave off? We have the encounter. Separation 3000, so it's a little better on this end, right? Yep. Let's go ahead and warp on over to that. Let's see, 51 days, 4 minutes. Wait a minute, something's not right about that. Let's go to our target mode. Ah, okay, so we just haven't begun our burn yet. Alright, now we'll do that, and we'll keep an eye on that while we're doing it. Alright, now, let's begin burning, bringing that intersect down again like we did last time. As close to 0 as possible. After we are done with that, we'll just set ourselves up the same way we did a minute ago. Or at least try to. Looks like we need to raise that throttle limiter. Yep, that's very much like it was last time. Of course. Let's try to zero that down as close as possible. 2, 1, 0, 9, 8, 7. But we are picking up more and more speed, but that's okay. Let's just bring it down as much as we can. Don't want it to be more than about 50, I'd say. We can still do that. Once it hits 50, we'll cut. It should be at about 0.2 by then. We'll go ahead and let it get to 0.2 unless it goes too far over 60. Alright. Now, we're only an hour and 40 minutes away. We need to make sure that our throttle limiter is set back up. Now we're ready. Let's go ahead and save our progress there. Now that we've rectified that mistake, let's zoom in, target our separation node, and then let's time warp over to it. Nice and close. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, cut. And then we'll time warp in just a little bit more. So we're about a minute away or so, maybe. That'll work. Now we should be able to see it. Let's go ahead and manually time warp until we need to do our retro burn. It's going to be fairly close this time compared to last time. Let's go ahead and begin to slow ourselves down to get our bearings, so we can slow down pretty quick. Just waiting for it to be lined up with us, or at least close to. Let's go ahead and start slowing down rapidly now. We'll just let it go on ahead and finish up. And then let's cut it about there, slow down the rest of the way. Bring it down to there, let the RCS take over the rest. Let's update our quick save. We'll deactivate the RCS and then point towards the target. We're only such and such meters away, like 200 meters away. Let's reduce our thrust limiter. And this time, in fact, let's keep that open so we can keep an eye on it. Let's begin to thrust till we are at about maybe 5 meters per second. Even that may be too much, I don't know. I need to be more careful this time. But we're going to take it up to about 5 meters per second or so. As it stands, we're looking at about maybe 25 seconds until rendezvous. Let's point ourselves retrograde, turn our thrust limiter up a hair. We are on our way. Let's just keep an eye on that and be prepared to slow down a little more quickly this time. I believe that's close enough, to be honest. 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Alright, let's cut. point towards the target, and whenever it reorients towards the target as well, this side is going to be a lot closer to this vessel than it is right now. That's why I tried to cut it off a little earlier, because now whenever it wraps around, as you can see, the distance is quickly lowering. It's not going to be right on top of it or anything, but I wanted to be safe. Once we get that, while it's doing that though, just check that, make sure, okay, we have our rendezvous, we just need to do the docking and transfer and then bring ourselves home. See, those are nice and lined up. Let's put it in SAS mode instead of target mode. Swapping back to this. Let's rotate our panels like last time, like every time really. Once we are there, lock our SAS again, go back to linear control mode and RCS on. Woo, we are not in linear control mode, are we? Let's go back to our rotation, deactivate our SAS, rotate again. Okay, hit X to go to linear control mode, then activate our RCS and boost on over. Now we're talking. 1 meter per second should be fine, give us about 25 seconds or so. A little hairy this episode, a little out of touch and a little rusty, but we're getting it done. Get the gist of it, right? Not making too bad of an example out of this, am I? Let's slow ourselves down now that we're close. Haven't really been able to play a whole lot, got a lot of personal things going on right now, making it a little difficult to do much else or be able to focus on much else. Alright, so we are now docked up. Let's go ahead and make our transfer by highlighting our hatch. Let's transfer Bob over. Bob will be okay. That'll take care of that. Let's transfer Bob back on over, and we'll begin refueling this pod. Transfer. There we go. Transfer you on over here. Come on now. Alright, now it's time to fill this thing back up. We will begin doing that since this stage is empty now. Let's first shut that engine down, and we will manually decouple that stage by selecting the decoupler and decoupling. We'll keep this engine off for now. Let's just grab the fuel tanks, which looks like those are the only 2 fuel tanks for that. This is the only fuel tank down here for this. Let's transfer fuel out of those 2 into this one. Once that is done, we'll deselect all those. And now, to bring them home, first let's update our quick save since it worked out successfully and we have plenty to come home with. That's all good. It's time to come home. Let's check our contract completion. Get that out of there. There's some of the signs from our mystery goo and ion collector. There's the surface data from Gilly, since that did transmit that. There's all of our accomplishments in this episode so far. Walked on the surface of Gilly, planted a flag on Gilly, performed a spacewalk in orbit of Gilly, a rendezvous, construction of the first station, docking and transfer near Gilly. We have done the rendezvous, first station, docking and transfer around the sun. Looking good. So that takes care of all that. Let's try to get ourselves away from our debris here by first making sure that our throttle is down and activating this skipper stage on the station. Let's deactivate the poodle stage over here. After we shut that down, let's put the thrust limiter back up so we don't have to remember to do that later. And we need to find the probe core that we have on this station. We can just point to the other side, a little more sunlight to work with. There you are. We are not trying to select the crew hatch though, are we? There we go. Alright, we will select the remote guidance unit or the probe core and control from here. And then point ourselves, let's go prograde. We'll just use prograde to pull ourselves away from this debris a little bit and get clear of it. Never know what will happen in a time warp. Alright, now let's set Kerbin as our target and find out where we are in relation to Kerbin. Kerbin needs to be ahead of us. So let's go ahead and set it as our target. See, our descending node isn't too far off, but let's go ahead and warp to this ascending node. We're still going to have to warp a little bit more upon arrival there, but we can just go ahead and warp to it and point anti-normal and readjust our degree of inclination relative to Kerbin to make this a little easier on ourselves. Upon arrival, let's zoom in and try to get it right on top of that ascending node and warp on over to it a little further and closer. And let's see where we are relative to that node. Fairly close. Once we are completely locked on to anti-normal, we'll finish the rest of the warp and be right on top of it before we do this. Yeah, it's good enough. Let's warp. And let's keep an eye on that ascending node. Try to zoom out so we can watch it wrap around a little bit. What is our mass anyways? Our mass is 76.9 tons. This skipper is really only supposed to be able to push about 65 tons, but it'll be okay. It's not as efficient as it could be. The more we burn, the more mass we're going to lose. But still, I doubt we're going to lose enough by the time that stage is out to match about 65 tons or less, but it's irrelevant. We need the fuel, we need the stages. If we're trying to bring everything back with us. We could just ditch the station and make it back with the main vessel by itself, but I don't want to do that. I want to bring the station back with us because there's really no sense leaving it in a solar orbit like this. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Once it hits 0, we'll cut that off and then slowly throttle back up until it wraps around like that. Cut. Alright, now let's deactivate that so we can gain rotation back again. There we go. Now we just need to treat Kerbin as if it's Duna and we are leaving Kerbin to go to Duna. That kind of deal. See, we'll be at the edge of our orbit. It's kind of the same as leaving Eve and coming back to Kerbin too. We just need to make sure Kerbin is ahead of us relative to our orbit, where we can draw a line directly from this station and vessel at the end of its orbit straight to Kerbin, and then that's when we're going to make the ideal transfer to get back home. Should be able to wrap this up by about an hour and 20 minutes of episode time, then we'll take a break and see about doing whatever our next contract is in another episode this evening, but we'll see. For now, let's go home. It's getting closer. It may even be very close to that descending node. In all honesty, that's what those are meant for, as long as they're lined up appropriately, but it looks like it's going to be a little beyond it. Now, we've already extended just a little bit out past Eve, so it's going to take a little bit longer to get there now than it would have if we were still in orbit around Eve or Gilly to be coming back to Kerbin. We've already passed the ideal launch window from Eve to Kerbin. But we're getting really close now. Zoom in so we can get a better track on that. Again, we don't want that to push too far out past our orbital line. Right about there should be fine. Nice perfect straight line at the edge of our orbit. So let's point prograde. Our target mark should be pretty much right on top of it by now, which is really what you're looking for. See, it's almost dead center. As soon as we hit that, we'll begin our burn. It should be right on the 90-degree inclination. Let's throttle up nice and smooth. See, we're moving it to where our apoapsis will be probably close to. Maybe here, if not the other side, but we're just waiting for that apoapsis wants this to hit the same height as Kerbin, which is about 13.3 billion meters. Right now it's at 11.8. Probably gonna have to stage. Yep, there we go. Let's cut that engine, manually stage the skipper off there. And it is imperative that this is the vessel that we bring back, as it is the one that landed on Gilly. Make sure our throttle is down, activate this wolfhound, and throttle all the way back up. Let's check our mass. Mass is 53.6 and lowering and counting. It won't really hit that 37.5, which is the max for the wolfhound. So again, it's still burning inefficiently, but it's okay. I do also believe that's the last stage on this station, which may not be good. I hope it's enough to get us back. If not, we're going to have to ditch the station. So it's at 12.8. It's gaining fairly good pace. Again, we're watching for it to hit 13.3 or so, and it should give us our encounter pretty much right then. 13.3, 36, 37, 38. There's our encounter. Okay, now let's focus on Kerbin. Zoom in. Let's get rid of that info panel so we have more control of our rotation. There we go. Now we're talking. Let's bring that periapse down as close to around the Kármán line, which is 70,000. Let's bring it as close as possible. Let's reduce the thrust limiter on our wolfhound a little bit so we can pin that down a little better. Zoom in, highlight that periapse, bring it down to about 100,000. That's good. Let's update our quick save. We need to make sure that we're coming in on the right side of Kerbin as well. And our Kerbin escape is over there. We're coming in from here. That looks good. We're going to be on the 90-degree side. Manually time warp ahead a hair. Just brought us down 3 meters. That's good. And for the sake of safety concerns, let's warp until we're about to touch Minmus and make sure that we miss Minmus. We should be back in Kerbin space within about 13, 12, 11, 10, 9. Let's go ahead and make sure that we're pointing retrograde once we arrive as well. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. We should be back in Kerbin space now. Let's see if we can't find where our home is. There it is. I can see the moon behind it. Don't really see Minmus though, never know where it's lurking. It's to the right of the planet. Far out over here, right above our solar panel. Looks like we'll be safe to make our way in, but just in case, let's warp till we're close to where the mun is. Refocus on our vessel along the way. Yeah, we're good. Okay. Let's adjust the limiter on that wolfhound engine back up to full throttle. And let's go ahead and warp closer to Kerbin. Hello, Mun. Good to see you again. Glad you're not wanting to kill us on our way back. Alright, now our altitude is 600 and some thousand. Let's see if that affected our periapse any with that warp. 99,769, that's what we're looking out for then. Let's go ahead and warp to that. Once we are about 150,000 in altitude, we will cut our time warp. Let it reorient to retrograde, and then once it does, we'll warp until we're about 30 seconds away from the periapse, I'd say. We'll begin our retro burn. After we reorient to retrograde again, as soon as it hits it, let's begin the retro burn. Basically just trying to make sure we wrap ourselves back around Kerbin at this point. By the time we hit the periapse mark, there should be enough fuel in this station to pull that off. We can also correct its degree of inclination in its orbit. It's looking a little there. And we can still burn about 30 seconds past the periods, which should be plenty of time to finish. Still plenty of fuel in that stage. Let's make sure it's also not taken from that stage. Okay, good. Let's bring that apoapsis down. In fact, as long as it's kind of just between Kerbin and the Mun, you can put it there, but I'm going to try to bring it in as much as possible. Leave ourselves a decent little relay orbital station and orbit around Kerbin here to put just another relay out. We will probably decommission it at some point. Don't want to continue burning for too much longer though, or we'll drop that periaps down below a favorable height. Let's warp between the apoapsis and the periapsis and try to correct our degree of inclination here. Looks like we'll have to be pointing anti-normal for that. Looks like we warped a little too far, but we'll go ahead and do it anyways. We need to bring it to 180 once we arrive at it. Looks like it might already be at 180 there. Something still seems a bit off. Let's point normal and then warp to the apoapsis, and we'll try to correct it from there. Say by the time we hit the apoapsis, it should be deviated from the 90-degree mark it will need to be at. That might be a more appropriate time to, yeah, see it's already way off on the 180 there, so what we're going to be needing to bring it up as we are heading down in our degree of inclination there. And we'll just burn normal until it's right on top of that north mark. Bring that down to 0 on our HDG there on the nav ball. I just say degree of inclination, but 0 and cut. See, that's fairly stable 90-degree equatorial orbit there. Let's go ahead and warp back to our periapsis and try to stabilize our orbit a little better to where it's close to like 100 by 100, 99 by 99,000. And we will land this other vessel. Let's check our fuel too. We have half a tank on that Wolfhound stage. How much does this vessel weigh now that we burned so much? 42.5 tons. It's still much more than what's preferred for the Wolfhound, but that's okay. Once we're pointing retrograde, we'll start our burn. Make sure to highlight our apoapsis as well. We just need to bring that down from 1.2 million to about 100,000. Looks like we're probably going to have about maybe 500 meters per second of delta V to burn to bring that down to the stable orbit that we're after. Should be at about 22,500 meters per second at our orbital velocity by the time we reach where we should be. Might have to make one more pass around to do it though, but we'll see. Don't want to get too far ahead of this to where that starts increasing too rapidly. It's the only issue that you need to be careful of. Let's go ahead and cut and warp back around again. Being a little bit of a perfectionist here, and I'm extending this beyond the normal hour, which I've been known to do, but I think at this point you should know what you have to do to be able to land the vessel. We're just wrapping things up in a nice, neat, orderly fashion in this episode at this point. Finish it up this time. 19, 18, 17, 16, 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9. That's stable. 99 by 100. We'll take it. Let's save. And we will wrap back around until we are close to the day side, as it's becoming daytime. Would be nice to land by the KSC for once, but there it is in the dark again. Guess we'll just have to land it away from the KSC again. But once we are on the other side of Kerbin here, where it's becoming daytime, we'll disengage from this station and begin a nice, smooth, clean landing without any crazy re-entry speeds. Which is fun, but it's not what I'm going to do. In fact, I do need to make sure the station is pointing prograde, and then once we disengage the dock, this can point retrograde, which will turn it around to have its engines pointing at the station, but we won't activate them immediately. Once that's there, we'll disengage the SAS, re-engage it to lock on just SAS instead of prograde. Let's go ahead and do our undocking. Swap back to this vessel. Activate our docking mode, SAS, RCS, and pull away from it just a little bit there. Deactivate the RCS, go back to staging mode, point retrograde, and then make sure this is at surface. So it's not going to. Okay, well, we need to go to docking mode and then reactivate our RCS and move ourselves out of that station's line of sight. Because once we activate the engines, like so, make sure that the throttle's down, activate the engines, crank those, and once your camera does that little shift, you know that you're on a deorbital path. Let's retract our solar panels now. And just reduce that surface speed. We're not going to use all this fuel, it's a little bit of a waste, but like I always tend to do, over engineering just in case anybody needs it. Let's close that docking port shield. We'll reduce our surface speed to, let's say, about 1300. By then we should have a nice path to land on some dirt, maybe in a new biome, maybe not. Heck, you know what, there's actually enough. Let's point radial, or let's point normal. Try to do a little bit of this before we hit the atmosphere. We're going to try to point it up towards the north. Try to expend some of this fuel so it's not entirely wasted. That is the poodle. It is going to do it very slowly, and we are rapidly decreasing our altitude thanks to that retro burn, but that's okay. We're just having a little fun with the extra fuel. No matter what we do from here on, it's going to be safe. We're going to land. Looks like we are pretty much going to have to use the rest of the fuel to try to go north. We may not even have enough to be able to do anything but go north-northeast. Yeah, it's going to be north-northeast. Land between northeast and north. Just barely a little beyond northeast. As soon as that's done, we'll eject and then point ourselves retrograde before we hit the atmosphere. So now it's pushing beyond northeast, going more north. Let's go ahead and go back to staging mode. Eject that stage, point ourselves retro. We can try to keep an eye on that, but I think we're probably going to lose sight of it by the time we enter the atmosphere. You can still kind of see it over there. It may or may not burn up. We'll find out. I'm just going to deactivate the user interface so we can watch it while we time warp through the atmosphere. Seeing if that thing's going to explode or not. Nope, I think it's going to slam into the surface. It's well on its way down. It's not slowing down as much as us, but let's go ahead and reactivate that time warp. Once we get close to the surface, see, I'm going to exit warp mode and just do this real quick. Don't tell me that thing actually landed. Let's activate our drones. There it goes. surface to not make this take forever. I'll then activate these chutes, go back and re-enable time warp, and let it keep on time warping down. And once it gets relatively close to the surface, I will cancel the time warp. Let's rotate to where we're on the day side with our... Yep. Remember in the test, that was going to go boom if it hit land because of the speed, but acted as a buffer, nice and safe for the landing. See if there's any new science we can get. We can get a little bit from the grasslands. How about that? Let's grab that. Grab the seismic data. Should be able to grab the gravity data since we are on land. Just can't grab it while flying in atmosphere is all. Grab the pressure data. I'm surprised we haven't had any grassland data. Huh. Let's grab a crew report, see if we can get any of that then. Nope. Okay, so we have had a crew report at least. Jebediah, it's time for you to actually do something. Let's get you out here to grab an EVA report and a surface sample. Let's move you away from that command pod hatch. We probably already have the EVA report though. Yeah, we do. Okay, so let's see about that surface sample. We can get a little bit from that. Alright, now let's get back up here, board back into our pod, and check these out. That's what we're after. Okay. So there's all of our breaking ground science from those modules. Don't think we're going to get much more out of those. Returned home from the surface of Gilly, from a flyby of Gilly, and orbit of Gilly. So that knocks out all the Gilly stuff, if I'm not mistaken. Let's go ahead and then recover our vessel here. And see what's in store for us in the next episode now that we are a half hour over on this one. That's all the coffee. There's never enough coffee. Let's wrap this up relatively quick. We'll take care of some of the other stuff off screen. And by that I mean I'm going to be getting rid of all the debris that we just created in space off screen. Otherwise, we're going to be doing the rest on screen. Real quick, let's check out our science. There's all of the data and science from our Gilly mission. All the stuff that we recovered on the pod. Glad to see everybody leveled up a little bit. That's good. Let's do a quick save update real fast. And then first things first, before we spend that science, let's go to our contracts and get rid of this one since we forgot to add that science lab. It's not going to hurt us a whole lot. We have, what would that be, 11 million in funding there. So let's go ahead and spend our science now. See if there's even really much we need to use. See, right now, let's go ahead and we have enough to unlock 2 of these final tier science parts, which we probably are going to head out the Jewel next, knowing the way the contract system works. So we need these RTGs. The radioisotope thermoelectric generators, they generate power when the solar panels cannot. Same thing for the mini nukes here for our breaking ground science that will allow them to operate at nighttime as well as nice and far away from the sun when the photovoltaic panels won't provide enough electrical power for those modules. So let's grab that. And then we really don't need that just yet either. We're not using the ore, we're not using the narrowband scanners just yet, so we'll hold off on that. Don't need any of this larger rover gear or any of these other rotor parts or grip pads. But there's not much else to use this on. We could strive to unlock the rapier engines, which would be nice. The rapier, however you want to pronounce it. However it is supposed to be pronounced. Let's go ahead and unlock the hypersonic flight as well as the heavy aerodynamic parts in preparation for finishing the tech tree by getting the aerospace tech as well as the experimental aerodynamics, the advanced motors, and then finally the experimental science. And that'll finish up the tech tree for us, hopefully in the next mission or 2. But before we go any further, let's go to our mission control. We're heading to Jewel. We need to fly by Jewel. It doesn't say anything about returning, making orbit, or anything else. We just need to engage a flyby. Let's grab that. see what else we have. Not seeing much else just yet. No, that's it. So, looks like in our future episodes, our mission will be to start conquering the Jewel system, which is a very fun system. It's like a miniature solar system. Before we cut the episode, let's take a preview of that and go ahead and get rid of the debris. Once we are loaded up in our tracking station, we'll go ahead and start getting rid of some things. And then we'll check out the Jewel system before we call it quits. So, go ahead and get rid of our debris first. Looks like there's only a few things to get rid of. One more to go. And that's all the debris. And 7 was the appropriate number for our flag. That's a relief. Alright, time to check out our next destination. It is beyond Dres, which technically should be our next destination, but here's Jewel. It's way out here. It's a lot easier to get to than you think, though, because the gravity of Jewel, kind of like Jupiter, as you can see, the gravity here, very powerful. Takes a lot to escape Jewel's gravity. Kind of keep that in mind like we did with Eve. And yeah, if you try to land here, it ain't gonna happen. You're not coming back either. You can dip into the atmosphere, but it's very dangerous. I believe it's at, I want to say 200,000 meters. Let's check it out. The parameters, the atmospheric conditions. Here we are, 200,000 meters. Yeah, so you don't want to dip in too much lower than that, or else you're not going to escape. It's way worse than Eve. And let's see what else we have. Let's see the gravity. It's 0.8 compared to Kerbin, which is like 1.01 or whatever, but still, it's a lot more powerful than it says. It's pretty rough, and anything that goes in will likely burn up one entry if you're not using a large heat shield. Let's check out the rest of Jewel, all the places we'll be heading in our next missions. So here we have Lathe. It's the only atmospheric moon in the game. It's really similar to Kerbin, especially where its gravity is at 0.8, its atmospheric height is at 50,000 meters. Very similar to Kerbin, just not as much to land. I had to be a little careful about that. It's kind of idealistic to land on the northern pole, because it's easy to kind of land in the same spot there if you're trying to make a colony. Otherwise, they have tons of biomes around Lathe. You just have to be careful about landing on them. And now beyond Lathe we have Val. There's a very special Easter egg that we're going to explore there when it comes time to land there. And Tylo. Now here's the thing about Tylo. Check out that gravity. It's pretty crazy for a non-atmospheric world. That should tell you something. It takes a lot of Delta V to land and return from Tylo. It's pretty rough. It's a good practice location for trying to like land on Eve and return from Eve, even though Eve is way harder. But moving on from Tylo, we have Bop. Very tiny little moon, no atmosphere, kind of similar to Gilly. And there's a very famous Easter egg here around this area. In fact, I'll just go ahead and show you where it is, but I won't tell you what it is. It looks like, if I'm not mistaken, it's about here. If not, it'll be on this side over here, or on this side over here in the dark. But it's up here near the North Pole, and you can also see that there is a bit of a hole there at the North Pole. I have yet to really explore that myself, but there is a very special Easter egg here on Bop that we are going to be exploring. Next up we have Pole. It's very pretty, very colorful, but really not anything too special going on here. It's just a very rocky, jaggedy moon with a lot of color going on. I believe that leaves one more. Nope, that's all of them. Pole, Bop, Tylo, Val, Lathe, and then the green emerald herself, Jewel. And that's where we're going to be heading in the next series of episodes and missions. But for now, I'm going to leave the tracking station, update the quick save, do the primary save,
and then I'm going to call it quits for now. I'm going to take a quick break, check out my data, see how much I still have available, see if I can pull off another episode this evening. If I can, then I will be back within, say, 15 minutes at the most. If not, then I will see you all on or after the 9th, whenever I get more data, and can continue the series. But for now, thank you for watching. Hope that has been a very interesting episode and very helpful. We covered a lot in this episode. We had to extend it about 40 minutes. Could have made a whole nother episode out of it entirely, but might as well knock it all out in this episode, I suppose. But once again, thank you for watching. I hope I've been helping out some of you, and I'll see you in the next episode, maybe here shortly, if not here in about 5 days. That's it for now. Might see you in about 15 minutes. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.